I get eager staring at the specs on a laptop that promises elite performance, and the question in the back of your head is, will this actually let me game on the go without blowing up my budget or my patience? I was in the same spot last month, scrolling through endless rows of 15-inch gaming rigs, trying to decide whether I should splurge on something that sounds like a mini desktop or just stick with a more modest notebook. The thing that finally tipped the scales for me was finding a model that seemed to balance raw power with a portable feel, and then actually testing it in the kind of real-world scenarios you care about: late-night sessions in a cramped dorm, a quick coffee shop break, and a weekend road trip. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. So let's talk about the NIMO 15.6 IPS FHD gaming laptop. At first glance, the headline features an AMD Ryzen 7 6800H, 16GB DDR5, a 1TB SSD, and Radeon 680M graphics make it feel like a desktop replacement squeezed into a 2kg chassis. The claim that it beats i7-12700H is bold, but what matters is how it behaves when you actually launch a modern title like Elden Ring, crank the settings up, and leave it running for an hour or two. If you're the kind of gamer who likes to sit on a couch, plug the laptop into a monitor, and play for marathon sessions, the first thing you'll notice is the thermal system. NIMO has opted for a dual-fan design that pulls air through the bottom and exhausts out the sides. In my own tests, the laptop stayed around 78 degrees under a sustained 1080p/high setting load, which is respectable for a thin 15.6-inch chassis. The fans ramped up to a noticeable whir, but they never crossed into the screaming motor territory you hear on cheaper gaming notebooks. That means you can keep the volume low enough that your roommates or family members won't think you're running a hairdryer in the next room. The downside? The fans do become audible after about 40 minutes, so if you're trying to game in a library or a very quiet CAF, you might have to lower the graphics a notch or accept a bit of background noise. Keyboard feel is another practical point that often gets glossed over in marketing copy. NIMO equips the machine with a full-size, perky RGB backlit keyboard. The travel is on the shallow side, about 1.2 mm, but the actuation feels crisp, and the keys have a subtle tactile bump that helps prevent fat finger mistakes during fast-paced shooters. I tested it with Valorant and Fortnite, and the key repeat latency was imperceptible. The only minor gripe is the lack of a dedicated macro row. If you're used to having extra programmable keys for MMOs, you'll need to rely on software overlays, which can feel a bit clunky compared to the hardware-level shortcuts you find on higher-end gaming laptops. Now, let's talk about the display. The 15.6-inch IPS panel is rated at Full HD with a 144 Hz refresh rate, which is a sweet spot for competitive gaming on a laptop. Colors are decent, nothing that would make a color-critical artist cringe, but the real win is the 180-degree viewing angle. I watched a friend stream the game from the opposite side of the couch and the picture stayed bright and uniform. The downside is the brightness ceiling. At maximum settings, the screen tops out around 300 nits, which is fine indoors but can struggle under direct sunlight. If you plan to game outside or in a very bright room, you'll want to bring a portable shade or a clip-in filter. Battery life is where any gaming laptop gets a reality check. With the Ryzen 7 6800H pulling around 45W under load, the 71WH battery gave me roughly 2 hours of mixed usage: some gaming, some web browsing, some video playback. That's enough to finish a short gaming session before you need to plug in, but it's not something you'd rely on for an all-day flight. The upside is the 100W USB-C power delivery port, which lets you charge the laptop at full speed using a single brick you might already have for other devices. In practice, a 30-minute charge added about 20 minutes of gameplay, which is handy if you're hopping between outlets in a co-working space. Portability is a mixed bag. The chassis feels solid, with a brushed metal finish that resists fingerprints better than the glossy plastics you see on many budget rigs. It's thin enough to slip into a typical 15-inch backpack, yet the weight hovers just under 2.2 kilograms, about 4.8 pounds. That's manageable for a commute, but if you're planning to lug it up a mountain for a weekend LAN party, the weight will be noticeable compared to a 13-inch Ultrabook. On the bright side, the laptop includes a full-size HDMI 2.1 port, a USB-C with DisplayPort and charging, 3 USB-A ports, and a microSD slot. That means you can hook up an external monitor, bring a mouse, and still have a USB stick for quick file transfers without needing a dongle hub. Price is where the conversation often stops. At around $1,300 US, the